Welcome to the Whole Career Podcast with Advent Health. I'm Brandon Strawn, and I'm joined by my co-host, Sky Kellogg.
Each episode features conversations with various healthcare professionals who will share their personal career journeys, insights, and perspectives on various healthcare careers. From nursing to technology to leadership, we'll cover a wide range of topics to help you stay informed and inspired.
Whether you're just starting out in your healthcare career, looking to pivot, or a seasoned professional looking to take the next step, this podcast is for you. We hope to empower you with the knowledge and the tools needed to make a positive impact in your field. At Advent Health, we believe that we are greater as a whole, and we invite you to join us on this journey as we explore the world of healthcare careers together. Welcome back to the Whole Career Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Strawn, and I'm here with Sky Kellogg. We are really excited today because we have an amazing guest straight out of the Leadership Institute. His name is Michael Paradise, and he is a senior manager. How are you doing today, Michael?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, we're happy to have you.
Absolutely. So really quickly, would you formally introduce yourself and give us a brief overview of your current role with Advent Health?
Absolutely. I enjoy doing leadership development at Advent Health. For the last 3 years, I've been in the Leadership Institute working on identifying, nurturing, and developing leaders for Advent Health. And right now, that has me leading our executive leadership program and our chief executive leadership programs out of the Leadership Institute.
Awesome. Okay, so you mentioned has you leading out of, right? So there are different programs that one can lead when in the Leadership Institute. So you said executive leadership. Do you mind just letting me know how many different programs are there within the Leadership Institute?
We have a number of different programs and offerings, some that go out to anyone who wants some leadership development within the organization, and some that are by invitation only based on your level of leadership. And so the programs that I'm currently leading are programs designed for executives, but I also do team engagements and workshops for individuals that are and teams that are looking for some development. Love to do that, by the way. And I just love working in an organization that values leadership so much that we have a Leadership Institute.
Yeah, Michael, and can you tell us a little bit more about what the Leadership Institute is and how that sets Advent Health apart from other organizations?
Yes, we exist, as I mentioned, to identify, nurture, and develop leaders for Advent Health. And we have a physical space on the corporate campus, which is a wonderful space where it's just dedicated to leadership development. We do workshops out of there. We broadcast out of there. We host programs there, all about developing leadership skills and working with teams on leadership challenges, those kinds of things. Things that I'm very excited about and that people around the organization may know from things like the Leadership Institute Book Club, which is broadcast every other month, or something like the Executive Leadership Program, our Leadership Internship, our Leadership Residency, and programs for physicians as well.
Perfect. Do you want to just shamelessly plug that book club really quickly? You guys, he has an amazing book club with Wendy Newmeyer. And so if you could just share a little bit about that.
You bet. Leaders are readers. And we are so excited to broadcast this book club. We choose a different book for every other month. We have a social media site and everything. It's an exciting way to get more leaders to engage with content, with books, and also connect with one another. It's a very light touch. It's a lot of fun. Wendy and I host the program, and we host it in a way that people end up choosing sides, whether they're Team Wendy or Team Paradise. And
I love it.
Wendy has more fans, but I don't know.
I mean, hey, listen, I can't pick a side. I'm on the fence.
You really shouldn't. I think Wendy has more fans because people are afraid of her. I'm afraid of her. I sit next to her on these broadcasts.
Wow.
But we host that out of Studio 7 here. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome.
It's got a morning show vibe. So there's the plug.
Yeah.
There's the plug.
I love
and can
it.
you share what Wendy's role is for our listeners as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wendy works in our Emerging Leaders program. So she especially works with the Leadership Internship, which is an annual program for college students that are interested in leadership and interested in working at Advent Health. We get wonderful interns during the
Absolutely.
summer that go through that program, and Wendy leads that out well.
She sure does. She sure does. So I wanted to touch on, as you develop and nurture Advent Health leaders for the future, what is your favorite leadership skills workshop to lead out and why?
Brandon, you will know plenty about our executive presentation skills workshop.
I will. Yep.
I love leading executive presentation skills. This is a workshop where we build confidence and teach leaders to step into the moment during their public speaking opportunities and put their best self on in order to reach especially an executive audience. And we have found that this 1 or 2 day course is extremely valuable and very practical for people
Yes.
who want to brush up on their skills or develop a 1 out of 10 confidence if they're currently at 0 of 10
Right. Right.
in how to present in a room of executives.
Yeah, I agree.
Love how practical it is, and that no matter what your experience has been in public speaking, you're going to grow.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually the first time that I met you, Michael, was in that Communispond
Mhm.
executive presentation. And it was amazing because, like you said, I know that you mentioned 2 days. I think my course was a 1 day,
Yes.
but it was still extremely valuable. And I think what I loved is that I was a little bit nervous because I had recently, began working here. And so I just wanted to do something that I think could, help bolster, myself, within the company. And I was expecting to see a lot of new people within the company, right? People who are maybe just getting into a role. To my surprise, there were people in that class with me who had been with Advent Health for 10 plus years, 15 plus years. And so I think it was encouraging to know that there's people at Advent Health that are still refining themselves, even haven't been here for so many years, probably already have really great executive presentation skills, but still willing to sharpen their tools. So that spoke to me. I was like, there's no way that even if, even though I'm early in my career now, as I go throughout my career, I need to continue to have that mindset. So it was great.
Absolutely. We have had everyone from leadership interns during the summer to retired executives
Yes.
come in and take
Yes.
part in the program. It just, and I think that's part of what this podcast is all about too. I mean, we're all at different junctures in our journey, and if we stop growing at any point, if we stop that self-discovery and that learning, we're going to derail ourselves and stall ourselves out. We can grow in whatever role we're in. We truly believe that in the Leadership Institute. And that might mean I have to take that step to say what's available to me and how can I take advantage of it.
Nice.
I'm glad that you did, Brandon.
Yeah, it was great.
Everyone listening on the podcast, if Brandon sounds polished to you and just brimming with confidence, I'm going to take full credit for
Absolutely.
it. And you can't convince me otherwise.
I'm cool with that. I co-sign that. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
And conversely, if anybody thinks that Brandon's not doing a great job, we need to sign him up for another one.
Yeah.
It's up to the.
It doesn't always take
listeners.
the first time.
I
Right?
should have done the 2 day one. The 2 day.
That's right.
Yeah.
2 days. You're halfway there.
Well, Michael, we talked a little bit, obviously, before jumping on the conversation here, but you have had a few titles in your careers, in several different careers. So can you tell us about your journey from pastoral ministry into higher education and now into a full-time role here at Advent Health at the Leadership Institute?
I've been blessed to have several different roles and experiences.
Yeah.
Especially spending 16 years in church ministry, full-time ministry. I spent some time as a pastor working with kids and youth. I spent quite a bit of time as an administrative pastor, as a church administrator.
Right.
And I was also a summer camp director and for 4 years. That, let me tell you, that experience of having, 50 staff members that you're overseeing, it's like a miniature company,
Yeah.
and teens and young adults
Yep.
being the employees and looking after kids. It's amazing that it works. And there are plenty of stories to go along with it, but it's just a blast and it was a great leadership opportunity for me in my 20s to have that experience. And then I also taught at Union College. Brandon, you know Union College,
Yes, I do.
and that's my alma mater. I got to teach there uh, on and off, just contract teaching there for 10 years. Loved teaching in the college setting.
What
Yeah.
courses, if I might ask? What
Yeah, I
courses did you
taught
teach?
courses on religion, very basic freshman level Bible courses like Christian beliefs. I taught a little bit about leadership. I taught about emotional health and well-being, and I taught a pastoral leadership 101 kind of course for students who are training to be pastors.
Cool.
During that time, I continued to work on myself, work on my own development. I have a very supportive family, and my wife even encouraged me to move on and get my doctorate. I got my doctorate in organizational leadership, thinking that that would help apply to my work as a minister and also in teaching, until I got a call to come to the Leadership Institute from a friend who's been a good friend of mine since I was in 5th grade, and that's
Wow.
Gina Creek,
Oh, okay,
who
awesome.
used to lead the Leadership Institute and now is the Chief People Officer for Mid-America in Advent Health.
Wow.
Nice.
That
That's
brings me
amazing.
here.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's incredible to have the opportunity to do leadership development full time. A lot of people probably don't get that opportunity. I'm just the dork for that job, and I love it with my whole heart.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I think I appreciate you sharing that journey for us. And so I think one of the things that I want the audience to hear about is maybe some of the times along that journey where maybe imposter syndrome or right, because I think for me, like leading out, teaching other people how to be leaders, even when, especially when you're not like the CEO, right? Or
Yeah.
you're not the person that they see as like all knowing, right? How do you navigate that, and what are some of the ways that you were able to I guess navigate that as you were going through those different careers?
Teaching leadership is interesting in that way, Brandon. I'm glad you brought that up, because we at the Leadership Institute, those of us who lead workshops and things, we could posture ourselves as the experts. Our expertise is in the area of leadership skill building, which is pretty universal, right? There are some leadership skills that are valuable in different areas, of course, but skill building is universal. I can't, we have a new program for CEOs, and I can't say, here's how you're going to be a successful CEO at Advent Health, because I don't know. I don't know, and I never will. But eh, what we can do is we can identify, even for some of those leaders who are at the top of their game and are wonderful leaders and are in the positions that they found themselves in, because they have some great strengths. But can we help to identify some of the areas of growth for those leaders? And all of those, I promise, all of those areas, there are skills. And skills are things that we can work on and that we can improve. If I don't show up well for a board meeting and I have to make a presentation and I can't speak in a concise manner, or I appear to lack confidence when I'm presenting, there are skills that we can work on to enhance that, to get better. And if we believe for a second that we can't get better at any of those things, then the growth has stopped. So
Yeah.
what we can do at the Leadership Institute is work on skill building at all these different levels, for different types of leaders, and enhance those. But as far as expertise, that's not our job. Our job at the LI is not to tell CEOs, here's how you can be an effective CEO, or here's how to be an effective executive.
Right.
I can't tell you much about TA and how to be a great talent acquisition leader. I don't have that experience, but I do know that there are probably some skills that you can work on, that all of us can work on to just get better. That's the philosophy.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
And Michael, obviously transitioning from a church setting to a corporate setting, what was that like? I'm just curious to know, what was that transition like for you, and how do you still use those skills and get to live out your inner mission throughout your time here at Advent Health?
Talk about imposter syndrome. I came from church ministry in a church context with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, where there's some common language with Advent Health and very a mission that makes sense. But stepping into healthcare was different for me, and then stepping into the corporate setting was different for me. There was a lot for me to learn. There is so much for me to learn. I'm 3 years in, so that's a position I found myself in. Was I had to learn a lot of new things. I am still shadowing people, and I always will shadow hospital operators, physicians and surgeons, nurses, things like that. I always will, because I just don't have that level of expertise. And if we're going to be teaching leadership skills, we really have to be well aware of what the needs are that are in the markets. But for me, I do see some similarities to what I've done in church and in academia, but at the same time, it's just so different. What does stay the same is my own personal mission,
Mhm.
and I do appreciate that here at Advent Health, I am welcomed to bring my whole self into my workplace. I truly believe that, and that means my pastoral background comes along with it. And so, there are a lot of people on my team and that I encounter that I'm just kind of their pastor. I don't know. Do I give off pastor vibes? Maybe I do.
Nah. Wait, I think Scott should answer that question.
Just the fact that there was some hesitation there, but, that tells me all I need to know.
No, well, you're just so well spoken, so I do think that speaks to it, because when I think of a pastor and being able to lead, there is that conciseness
Sure.
and that professionalism. So I would say it's, if anything,
You
it's a
don't know
good
enough
thing. You want to
pastors,
give, yeah.
No, I will say, I think that I have found in my limited research that I've done, but that there are so many pastors that have second careers in leadership. And it's amazing, because I did not study theology or religion to become a pastor. So I wasn't really well versed on what the process was like to become a pastor. Everybody knows that a church has a pastor, right? But they're not exactly sure on like how they got there. So
Mhm.
learning about that, I then understood a lot of what pastors had to study to become a pastor, right, involves leadership and management.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and actually running a church, or, whatever we might call it. And so I wasn't aware of that until recently. And so I think, to answer your question about, do you give off pastor vibes? I think yes. I think knowing that now that you're in this position, and I would say, absolutely, just because I feel like a lot of pastors do have management leadership that's down pat.
Even if the listeners think about their own pastors, your pastor has to be excel in their ability to handle finance, in their management of people. They have to solicit volunteers. They have to be fundraisers.
Yep.
They have to be upbeat and energetic. They have to cast a vision. They have to present in front of people often. They have to manage a board and many committees that come off of that. They have to always be on. They have to do chaplain work. They have to know the hospitals and know when people are sick and well, and
Yep.
funerals and weddings and all of that. There's a lot to manage, counseling.
Yeah.
So pastors get good leadership experience. I've always been blessed to be a part of a pastoral team.
Right.
I was never the lead pastor or the pastor that gets up and preaches every week. I was always the pastor that was the associate that preaches once every quarter. And, when I would preach, I'd come off the platform and a little old lady would tell me, "Oh, Pastor, that was nice. That was like a children's story." And I think maybe what they're trying to say is, yeah, that reached me, like only a story could. That's what I try to tell myself, but really it's
Yeah.
like a pat on top of the head saying, "Nice try."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
So out of those different jobs, which one do you think, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Out of the many jobs that you had, which one of those jobs do you feel you experienced the most growth as a leader, including the job you're in now?
I've craved growth throughout my career. That's why I got my doctorate. Really is, I felt that I needed growth. I had been in the same place for 6 years, and it was just time to see what's next. And so, adding education to the role that I was playing was important to me, and that's really why I'm here, is because I love to grow. I would say that switch over for me of jumping into leadership development full time and Advent Health and corporate leadership and healthcare, that's been the biggest shift. It's one that has just rocked my world and that I'm still learning from. Yeah, I mean, just 16 years and being trained in church ministry and then stepping into this. I'll always need to grow here.
Right.
So yeah, this is the one.
There you go. There you have it.
Awesome. Well, we're going from pastor vibes to author vibes. Let's talk a little bit about that.
I love it.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So I think you're the first author, at least knowingly, that we've
Right.
interviewed so far.
Right,
I mean,
right,
unless
right.
if anyone else wrote a book and
Right.
we didn't ask you.
Well, you could plug it on the website. Or
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll add a link to the book in the bio.
I love it.
But yeah, we are really excited to talk about your book, The Way of Wisdom. So what inspired you to write a book?
I love to read. I read quite a few books each year, and
If you could give a number,
I read
Let's put a
60
number.
books a year.
60 books a year.
Yeah, on average. I set a goal each year.
Okay. He was trying to be modest. He didn't want to, but tell it like it is. So
Okay,
60
yeah,
books per
60.
year.
72 was my high,
Wow.
but 60 books that's my goal this year, and
Okay.
I should hit it.
Man, we're rooting for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
That
sorry.
reminds me, I got to get back to reading.
Right. Sorry, go ahead. I
Yeah,
cut you
no,
off.
love reading. Follow some authors that I admire, and after finishing my dissertation, I knew that writing was something I wanted to add to the other things I was doing in my life, and I used one of the chapters from my dissertation as a starting point for this book, The Way of Wisdom, about mentoring stories in the Bible for leaders. And writing that was a pleasure for me. I've just enjoyed it. And I have tried to find a niche for myself where Bible and theology and ministry blends with leadership development, because that's me. That's who I am. So that's probably where I will be as an author, is somewhere in that juncture.
I love it. I definitely. So I'm going to be totally transparent. I'm 75% of the way through the book, so I haven't read it fully, you all, but I'm almost
I think
done.
that's pretty good.
Yeah, and I have to say it's a great read.
That's nice.
And yeah, it's a great read. I think that going in.
Can you imagine if he came on and said, I give it 2 out of 5 stars, but to
right.
be fair, I'm only 75% through.
Yeah,
Brandon,
to be fair,
the
yeah.
last quarter of the book stinks. I'd say just put it down now. Yeah.
Thanks. Perfect. I'll
Yeah.
move on because I got to get to my 60 books.
You got 59 others.
Right,
Yeah.
Right. So I think I enjoyed that within the book, right? You tied in the biblical teachings and different things like that. But it was also applicable. Like every part of the book was something that you could make practical. And I'm probably like going off a little bit here, I was just impressed with the structure of the book. So I just want to talk about how do you format a book, right? And by structure of the book, just to give the audience an idea of what I'm talking about, right? From the introduction to the chapter length, right, to the chapter breakdown, and then also the questions that you have to beginning at the beginning of the chapter, and then the post prompts that you have at the end of the chapter. So very much so, almost like a workbook, but not
Yeah.
a workbook. So I just wanted to see if you can break down how did you come up with that format for the book?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think if it's not practical, why write it? If it's not going to be valuable, this is a resource. I publish it through Advent Source, uh, which is a company that resources leaders in churches and elsewhere. And so if it's really going to be a resource for leaders, it's got to be something that's very practical. So questions at the beginning and then reflection and preliminary questions. I thought those would be a very important element. And the breakdown of the book really is taking several stories from Scripture and taking them one at a time. And rather than saying, I need a story in the Bible that talks about succession planning, we looked at what are the mentoring kind of connections in the Bible, uh, of which I had 10,
Yep.
and let those be the chapters, and let's see what those stories tell us versus let's try to put something on those stories. So succession planning is one of them, for leaders who are looking to take the next step or looking to step back a little bit and retire or making a move and who's going to replace me and why I would need to prepare somebody who's in my downline. And you look at stories like Moses and Joshua, where Joshua spent so much time as the protege to Moses.
Yep.
And then Moses died, and God was like, all right, it's time to go, Joshua. Let's do it. Promised land. You know,
Lead us.
get us there.
Right.
Or someone like Elijah and Elisha. There are stories in Scripture that just that can instruct us, and that's what I really wanted to bring out from the perspective of mentors and mentees, and what does the Bible have to say about that? That's the structure of the book, and by allowing the stories to speak for themselves as much as I could, that's what I really wanted to bring out for the readers.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that connection. There's so much to be learned and just grasped there as the reader to understand that the Bible has practical implications today for leadership. So I love that, and I love your focus on mentorship. Obviously, that's something that's very near and dear to your heart, and that you have spent so much of your life dedicated to. So, in regards to mentorship, what does it mean to be intentionally available to you?
Intentionally available is something that those ought to be two words on my heart as a leader, or in whatever role or capacity I'm in, at school, at work, at church, at home, that I am going to be available as a mentor to somebody else. It may be somebody that says, I would like for you to mentor me. Can we set up an appointment? Wonderful. It may not be that. And that's okay. Those informal mentoring opportunities are also important. And I need to make myself available for that. I may even, especially as I get older and I get more experience in my career, whatever my career may be, I may be able to come alongside someone who is less experienced and say, can I meet with you? And there's part of the intentionality right there. I care about this because I have had people in my life who have done precisely that. They've brought me along, even if I haven't asked for it. And sometimes it's after the fact that I realize this person has been a mentor to me, and I hadn't really stopped to think about it. So the intentionality, I think, is so important because there's so much that we get from relationships, especially intergenerational relationships. Can I tell you an interesting fact that I
Please.
found? Uh, in my dissertation study, which was on intergenerational mentorships, we put together pairs of people from the millennial and boomer generation. Some of those pairings were people who already knew each other. It was a large church. We did it in a church setting, very large church. Some of those folks already knew each other, already had a good relationship, and they said, I choose this person. Some of those relationships, I just put them together because I had a millennial and
You
I
get
had
who
a
you get.
boomer.
No.
You get, and you don't throw a fit.
Right.
That's right. Just like third grade teacher might say. One thing that popped out to me that I didn't expect to find in the study was that whether they already knew each other or they had been a forged mentoring pair, their responses as to their satisfaction with their mentoring pairing was exactly the same. So those who were forged and those who already knew each other, it was exactly the same. So somebody might have the opportunity to be in a mentoring program at work or something, and they just get put with somebody. And some people might come alongside someone and say, I'd really like for you to mentor me because you've meant a lot to me over the past couple of years working with you. Either of those situations can work. And sometimes they don't, and you just find somebody else. But either of those situations can work, and we have so much to learn from one another.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And you mentioned in your book about intergenerational and how that pairing sometimes supports the retention of the younger audience of the church. So I enjoyed reading about that, and I'm looking forward to my church now that I attend. I'm like, okay, wait, where are those people that are like older, and where are the younger people, and how can I help merge them and make sure that they're connecting? So
And doesn't that work here too?
absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
thinking about retaining our talent, wouldn't you expect that, especially a young person, let's say someone in their 20s, who's a few years out of school, working at Advent Health, wouldn't the likelihood of them being retained and staying and growing within the organization be so much greater if they had somebody checking in with them from another generation, checking in with
Absolutely.
them, befriending them,
Yeah.
sponsoring them even, which is different than mentoring. Sponsoring. I'm going to go and speak to somebody about this job opportunity because I think you'd be a good fit. Or here are some things you might need to work on. Let's go talk to the Leadership Institute.
Right.
And we do some of that with our leadership residency and internship, but there's so much that has to be done with 90,000 plus employees in this organization where we all have a responsibility to it, to mentor others and to be mentored. And that's a real learning organization, I think.
I love it. I love it. And so I know that in your book, you introduced us to one of your mentors, Pastor Rich. And so I just wanted to see, can you explain maybe some of the ways that you were able to grow under his mentorship?
Rich Carlson was the chaplain, the vice president for spiritual programming at Union College for something like 40 years, recently retired.
Oh, nice.
I have had the opportunity to know him as a student in his programs at college, as a student employee for 4 years in his campus ministries program, and then also as a coworker, as we pastored in the same church and taught at the same school. So knowing him over those years, one of the things that I tried to bring out in the book was he had been mentoring me all along, and I can tell plenty of stories of how there were mess ups that I had where he, kind of helped me out. One time in my 30s, when we were at that point working together, I went and I said, I would like for you to mentor me. And his response, I'll never forget the face that he made, because his face was, he kind of shrugged. It was almost like, yeah, obviously that's what I've been doing for 15 20 years here, but yes, of course I'll
Right.
I'll mentor you, you know.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, oh cool, I already have a mentor. And those who are even listening to this podcast that went to Union College know Rich Carlson and the impact that he had. And I'll tell you the thing that has had the greatest impact on my leadership. And I would also throw some of my other, we have a lot of leaders here at Advent Health, executive leaders that came through Union College.
Yeah.
And Rich Carlson has something to say about that. He had a part to play in their development, because at Union, the students lead because of the way he chooses to lead. He puts you in a role. He allows for whatever the students really want to do and lets them own the experience and lets you lead and make your mistakes. And he's there to support you and he's there to cheer you on. But he lets the students lead. I grew so much from him. And the way that I lead now, I attribute to the way that he led when I was his student worker.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
And Michael, obviously, I would say you're considered, at least by us, right, an expert in mentorship. So for those that are listening, we've spoken with a lot of guests who have talked about their mentors, right, and the importance of mentorship and who helped them along the way. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to attribute your growth and highlights of your career to someone else. So for those that maybe are a little lost in this process, what would you say would be the best piece of advice to give them to be able to find a mentor and a mentorship experience that is mutually beneficial for both parties?
We all need mentors. Part of that process for someone that you mentioned that may feel just a little lost, or I don't have anybody in this organization, I'd make a couple of suggestions. One would be, take the time to step back and say, who has mentored me over the course of my life? And it may not be anybody at work, but who has mentored me? Okay, there was somebody in 6th grade that my teacher, or the janitor in our locker room, or somebody that kind of took me under their wing, or just gave me some advice that I needed at a certain time, or was willing to listen to me when I felt nobody else would. Who was it that has mentored you? I think starting with that exercise helps me to know, here are the kinds of things I might be looking for in a mentor. And then I have to be intentional. I have to be active, proactive, to identify a mentor in my life. If nobody's come up beside me, which is very common, and said, I'm your mentor, I have to go and I have to find that person. So I have to be satisfied. I have to be realistic, and not everybody's going to be a great match. And somebody may say, I don't have much time right now, and that will fizzle out or something. That's okay. Let's identify somebody that would be a good fit. Is there somebody that you admire right now? Is there somebody that you might start by just shadowing? Can I follow you in your work for an afternoon? Can I round with you as a leader? Or I'm interested in the kind of work that you do in IT. Can I see what that's all about and just ask you some questions? Start with that. What I have found is that people love to talk about what they do in general. People love to open the doors. Some don't, but most people really do. So with that being understood, why wouldn't I be proactive and try to identify that person? Yeah. You have to be vulnerable to ask, don't you?
Yeah.
That's hard. I don't want it to
Very
feel
hard.
like
Yeah.
that's easy. Just ask somebody.
Yeah, I mean, it took you years before you asked Pastor Rich, right?
I had to figure out that was really a thing.
Right.
But that's what I mean.
Yeah.
I had to identify, oh, okay, I need a mentor. And then I
Right.
asked somebody who was definitely already mentoring me,
Right.
Mhm.
But I didn't even know what it was.
Right. Yeah.
So let's start with that exercise. Who has mentored me? Who has meant a lot to me in my life? What are the kinds of things I have looked for in a mentor, and the kinds of things I crave right now? And that'll help me identify who's out there for me.
Yeah. And what style you're receptive to, because everybody has a different mentor. As a mentor, like a different style, right? And so as a mentee, what's the best style for you that you're going to receive well?
Right.
And so as far as the mutually beneficial part, I had never heard that before. So can you explain, like, mutually beneficial for someone to be in a mentorship? So meaning the mentee and the mentor are both,
Yeah.
benefiting. Can you explain how is that possible?
I'm going to even take it a step further than that. How about that, Brandon?
Listen, this is your show.
It is.
Absolutely.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Whole
I love it.
Career
I love it.
podcast with your host, Michael Paradise. It's Sky Kellogg's show, but I'm running it now.
There you go.
Yes, a mentoring pairing is beneficial to the mentee. We already talked a little bit about that.
Yep.
It's beneficial to the mentor, and it's beneficial to the organization. If it's a company, if it's your church, whatever the case is. For the mentor, there are a number of reasons why it's valuable. First of all, as a mentor, I learn how to step into a role of leadership that I may not have accessed before. I have to assert myself as a leader because now I've gone beyond leading self and leading results, and I'm leading others very intentionally. So that mindset does a lot for a leader. Also, just as a mentor, why wouldn't I want to share and extend my legacy as a leader? The things that I've accomplished, why would I want that to go away with me? What am I so afraid of? How can I empower the next generation to pick up where I've left off? It can only benefit a mentor.
Yeah.
And it benefits the organization with retention, like we mentioned before, and with the sense that what happens here matters, and our leadership matters. And I have people in this organization that I trust. There's just more trust that happens within the organization. So it can be beneficial in all three of those ways. You know, in the book, I reflect on Saul and David a little bit. I love the story of Saul and David. Saul was just like so close so many times, I feel.
Right.
He was the first king of Israel, and David came in behind him, and, you know, the sling, and he killed Goliath, the giant, and Saul was jealous of that and didn't want David to become king. But David was okay being behind Saul for all those years. It was Saul that couldn't handle it.
Right.
But imagine if he did. Imagine if he did, and he said, you know what? We'll be even stronger. My kingdom will be greater if I make David my top general, and, you know, we go out together. Imagine how much greater Israel could have been at that time.
Right.
Instead, kingdom gets split up, and he loses his own life and his sons and his whole line. Anyway, what do we have to lose by mentoring someone else?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And the way you brought all of that together, it was a new concept for me, because I'm always thinking, okay, if you're mentoring somebody, the mentee is just getting all of the benefits, right? So I'm like, what am I getting out of this, right? And I think I wanted to touch on that specifically because for someone out there that is contemplating, like, should I take this additional time out to do this? Should I pour into this in this way? So I just want to make sure they know that it's going to benefit them as well, too.
Yeah.
And in your book, Michael, The Way of Wisdom, you speak about legacy. So how someone as a leader can extend their life's work and passion by mentoring someone. And you touched on this a little bit here, but for the leader listening to this podcast who has not started thinking about who will replace them in the future, right? What are some simple things that he or she can do to begin identifying that person and begin building and shaping them now?
I think one of the problems that we have, not just Advent Health, but in our culture, with what we call succession planning, one of the big hangups that we have is that leaders are afraid to give up a little bit of their control. Some do it willfully. Let me start to develop somebody in my downline. Let me have somebody that I've identified that I'm going to pour into that's going to step in. But not everybody does that. It's because we're afraid. You know, we're afraid. If I start mentoring Sky, you know, and I'm going to retire in the next year, I know Sky is going to do a good job, but that means I'm going to be forgotten, and I'm going to be invisible, and nobody's going to remember me, and people are going to think, oh, this is Sky's legacy, and I lose out. It's selfish, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the big hangups that we have with succession planning. I think succession planning is something that every leader ought to own for themselves. And maybe, if I ever move on, they're not going to replace me like for like and put somebody into my exact position. That would be okay. But who am I developing that can grow? If I truly care about this organization and especially about its mission, I'll be looking to do that, because the mission of this organization is not to extend the wisdom and might of Michael Paradise.
I see what you did there.
Although now that I think about it, hold on, I could set up maybe my own organization.
Well, that's it here on the whole. We don't want to get shut down, but yeah.
Okay, so just in the last couple of minutes, I've taken over the podcast and the whole organization.
Right? Yeah.
I am not going to be invited back.
No, you're all good. You're all good.
All right. You know what I mean? It's not to extend my own,
Right.
ability. It's extend the healing ministry of Christ. And if I care about that, I'll pour into others, because that goes on forever. That's not just something that happens during my career.
What you're touching on is a huge note of humility, right? That
Sure.
Leaders have to stay humble to be able to remember that. And that is a tough thing to overcome, our pride, right? As humans. So I think that's a really great takeaway from this.
Absolutely. And so, right, we mentioned legacy statement in the book. We just touched on a little bit here. What is your legacy statement?
I have a personal mission statement.
Yes, and you kind of touched on it earlier, but yes.
Yeah. I lead from an abundant life rooted and growing in Christ. Leadership is important to me. Growing and being rooted in Christ and growing as a follower of Jesus is important to me. And also, Jesus says to his followers, I came so that you could have abundant life.
Right.
I'm all about that. I'm trying to grow my own family at home in the mindset that God has given us good things, and life is something to be celebrated. And I really like to bring that into work with me and into everything I do. Books, my podcast here.
Oh, right. Yes.
You're
right. Yep.
No, I that's my personal mission, and I do look at it every once in a while and see if it needs updating.
That was my follow-up question. Like, is that something that changes every 3 years, or are you looking at that and depending on where you are? But I guess what I wanted to ask in reference to that is, can that personal statement or that legacy statement stay with you no matter what title you're in? Or does it have to change when you get to a certain level?
I think an exercise like developing a personal mission statement is a valid exercise, especially yearly. Just seems to make sense to do it at the beginning of a year, or with any title change, career change, educational change, family status change, things like that. I have adjusted mine. And one of the changes that I made was to add leading from an abundant life, because leadership has just become, and the study of leadership has just become so important to me in my own life, that I couldn't have a mission statement that didn't have it in there. Also, in one of my college classes, we used to work on personal mission statements and had everybody do them. And I'd read some from Oprah and this person and that person, And the ones that I find the most powerful are brief, they're succinct, and punchy. I want to be able to say, can I measure up a life choice that I'm going to make up against my mission statement? So I may choose to go into a different career and say, now I'm going to, go into pastoral ministry. Can I look at my own personal mission statement and say, does this fit? Does this mesh with that? And conversely, I could say, I want to go be a used car dealer, and does that mesh with my personal mission statement?
Right.
I could be rooted and growing in Christ as a used car dealer, but boy, that leading component isn't going to be there as much. And that's something that's valuable to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it has to be reevaluated.
mind blown because I think that supports making decision making easier. Not easy, but you know,
Right.
a little bit easier because you're going back to that personal statement and, like you said, making it punchy and you know, hoping that it measures up, and making sure that it measures up. I think that's some great advice
Yeah, you
for
get it.
an indecisive person
Yeah.
such as
Yeah.
myself. Okay.
Yeah. So what tool can I have to say, how do I help myself make a decision?
Yeah.
And if it's a page long thing or a whole full half page paragraph, you know, everything's going to be included in it. And I don't find that that's useful to me in any of my decision making. I want somebody else to be able to look, and Brandon to say, you know, you're making some life choices that don't show that you're rooted and growing in Christ.
Right.
Well, then I got to reevaluate.
Well, Michael, this has been a wonderful conversation. We are so grateful that you joined us today. We thank you to our team here at Studio 7, as well as those of you watching maybe on YouTube can see we've had an upgrade in our in our recording area. So thank you so much to the team here. But thank you also to our listeners for listening to the Whole Career Podcast. We hope that you subscribe and follow us on our Instagram at Life at Advent Health. Feel free to share any ideas, concepts, questions that you may have, and we'd be happy to respond to you there. Thank you for listening and take care.